This is a clip from the latest episode of the Game Football podcast from The Times. To listen to the full show, go to wherever you get your podcasts. Let's talk about the game, shall we? And thank God we have the senior sports writer Alyson Rudd, who was there in the ground watching this amazing, amazing match unfold. Did we see this coming, Alyson? I would say yes, we did.
I think so.
Yes.
I was cheered out of the house by my children going, "You're going to have a lovely time today, Mum, aren't you?" So I don't think that came as a surprise to anybody at all. Seeing as we're on the theme of Christmas,
Remember the rule, no crackers.
Absolutely. But if you're the sort of person, and they exist, right, who say things like, "Oh, I only give homemade Christmas presents. I don't buy into the commercialisation of Christmas. I make my own presents." But for some reason,
I like how that person is just like a slightly posher version of your own voice.
But one Christmas, you've broken both your arms, or you've run out of felt and wood. Do you not give any Christmas presents, or do you go to the local shop and buy some pretty presents for the people you love?
You've been thinking of this one on the CNN house.
The latter. And as I was sat there listening to Ange Postecoglou, I thought he is the Grinch now, isn't he? Because it's one thing to have a set of philosophies, a principle. He now says he's fed up of talking about it and being asked about it. But that's because we're getting to peak ridiculousness. If circumstances dictate that you have to change what you prefer to do, and you're in a paid job, that's what you should do. And I lost my tether with him, really. I really have lost my tether with him, because in him saying he's had enough of it and people don't understand, or they do understand. How often does he have to say it for people to understand where he's coming from? He's missing the point completely. What we want to understand is why, when you've got 10/11 players out, a really naive young defence, a goalkeeper who cannot play it from the back, why do you not think, okay, I'm going to have to, just temporarily, while I'm in this fix, I'm going to have to change things a bit. And if anything, this game proved that even with a long injury list, they've got enough attacking talent who are fit to score goals against Liverpool. If they'd played it better, if they'd been clever about it, if they'd tried to frustrate Liverpool for long periods and then caught them on the break, they could have nicked a win or a draw. But instead, it was just this huge, ridiculously pleasant invitation, come at us. The opening goal, I challenge anyone here in this room to say they've seen a player with so much time to pick his cross as Trent had to cross into the box. It was just there was no one near him. And everyone knows what a good crosser of the ball he is. It was so relaxed, and they were at home, and oh my word, it was disgraceful.
On that goal, I thought the very special thing the smart thing that Liverpool did was they sort of clustered their play to one side. So Gravenberch moved over to the left, and they moved themselves all over to the left side so that Trent was in space. So I thought that was a credit to how Liverpool manipulated space to create space for Trent Alexander-Arnold. But to your general point, I really do sympathise with Postecoglou, because asking this team, this defence, this inexperienced defence, to defend, I don't think necessarily leads to better outcomes than the one that they had by playing in this attacking way. They scored 3 goals, and you can get into the sort of how much sort of Liverpool were paying attention late on or whatever. But as in, to ask Jed Spence, Archie Gray, Dragoshin, Pedro Porro and Forster to defend, if they did that...
But is it not about defending as a team?
They're defenders.
No, yeah. They're not very good defenders. And if you ask them to defend...
Try and mask that a little bit.
Just because you sit in doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to defend better. I remember when Leeds... Leeds, when they came up with Marcelo Bielsa, they had a team that was quite uniquely attuned to playing attacking football. They played man-to-man, and it was a sort of surprise for everyone. They did well in the first season, didn't quite work in the second season. Jesse March came in, and they avoided relegation. But where things really came unstuck for them was when players that were developed and played with an attacking sense, were asked to do something different. When Javi Gracia came in, you had this quite consistent level of performances, and he appeared, and the performance level dropped off a cliff. Likewise, when Sam Allardyce came in, the same thing happened. And that's because those players couldn't do sit-back, low-block defending because what they were good at was attacking. These guys, I don't think they have the capacity to just sit back and defend. I think if they did, honestly, I reckon it could have been worse. But I imagine many people disagree. But
yeah, I'm very conflicted about this now, because first of all, because I really like Ange. I'm a Celtic fan. What he did there was great.
And you did say this when he came to Tottenham. There will be no changing.
Yeah. And also, I've actually loathed a lot of the analysis around Spurs at the moment. I think it's so many people make themselves sound like quite outdated when they're talking about ignore what the manager's asking them to do. Just sit in for 5-10 minutes, lads. Let's get until half time. That sounds like outdated. You can't do that now. You can't ignore what a really heavily systems focused manager, which is what most managers are nowadays.
Would you ever have done that as a player though?
Yeah, but I never played for Ange.
No, I'm not. I'm just asking generally, like that idea of a player on the pitch taking a call that contradicts their manager's directions. Yeah, you would, for the sake of the context of the game, look at it and go, I'm not going to do what he thinks he wants me to do because it feels wrong.
Yeah, but it would only be brief. It wouldn't be like we're going to kind of go against everything, the entire philosophy of the football team, which is what they're asking them. Yeah. A lot of pundits and people are asking to happen. So, like, there's that as well. I just fundamentally, like, I'm kind of with Hamzah. I see what he's saying about the outcome might not necessarily be better, but I also just don't think Ange has ever come up against teams who will press and will be as good as this opposition like this before, and I don't think it's going to work.
But so you don't think it ends up working, because the whole point of what Ange was saying, and a lot of Tottenham fans on the Times desk, including Glenn, one of our senior production people, who I often refer to, the Glenn-ometer. We know where Tottenham fans are. He was in the office yesterday and watching the game with us unfold. Happy to stick with Ange. His view is stick with him for the season. But you don't see that actually they're going to... This is not going to be a triumphant come through this sticky patch and all of a sudden it'll all click. You think it ends badly? That's
my instinct more and more. I take the fact that they're playing without, as Hamzah's right pointing out that that defence, Archie Gray, he's been brilliant in fact. Jet Spence in isolation played pretty well. There was moments where he didn't quite get the offside line right.
Yeah.
They're playing with a heavily depleted team, and when they have all their players back, but the thing is, when they have all their players back, I still come back to it. It's a high wire act. Even when you've got Romero, you've got Van Ven, you've got rapid defenders, you've got players of like getting close to an elite level. If they drop off at just like 3% or whatever, it's calamitous. And then you come back to the whole vision of it all, and that he's asking these players, asking Fraser Foster to play like this is stupid. It's absolutely nonsensical. Hamzah and I were talking about this before. What people ask goalkeepers to do nowadays when they're completely incapable of doing it is madness. But Foster is like, probably it's wilder than anyone. You look at David Raya, who's like, the way he collects the ball, he's like an outfield player. A pass comes and he opens up in one movement. He's on his toes. He's like, he's on the half turn almost. Foster stops the ball, then shuffles round it, and then has to take another touch, and then has to move his massive tree trunk legs to be able to kick it in time. It's madness.
So is that not then to Alyson's point about Ange?
That's what I'm talking about. The conflict is real. Yeah. It's like I can understand why you've got to stick to this vision, but I don't think it. I think there has to be within that, and we're not talking about asking your defence to sit in a low block and getting two midfielders in front of you. I'm not asking that. Just don't make a fundamental part of your build-up phase giving it back to Fraser Foster. Yeah.
Well, what's the alternative?
That's stupid.
Well, but also just as quickly come in on this, because I was at the Tottenham Manchester United game in the week, and obviously completely different oppositions. But in terms of, and I always talk about this narrative, right? So yesterday when I'm speaking to Pete Rutzler from the game and he's telling me what Ange has said, I'm able to say to him, they've conceded 13 goals in 3 home games or whatever. That wouldn't have been the case if they'd just dispatched Man United 3-0, which is looked how it was going in that game. And that those 2 goals were precisely because of what Gregor said. It wouldn't have been a philosophy change. You just needed Fraser Forster to boot it twice, and they wouldn't have conceded 2 goals.
But
or Archie Gray not to give him it from on the goal line
just,
from 6 yards.
Just launch it. That's not a sit-in. We don't need to change absolutely everything about what we're doing, but that's just a slight logical call. And then they win that game 3-0 rather than 4-3. And also, the other thing that did, but it being in the stadium, which I'd never been to before, how quick it turned was incredible. We went from being 3-0 up, playing quite well, lots of people talking about, Archie Gray looks quite bright in defence. Jed Spence, it's brilliant that he's getting a chance. To the kind of vitriol that was heading towards the players was incredible at 3-2 down. And so that's another thing that I don't understand about it, of where, it's like almost like a PR exercise. You could stop that from happening, and then this whole week wouldn't be, yes, you might have still lost 6-3 to Liverpool, but you would have won 3-0 against Manchester United and into the Carabao Cup semi-finals. But there's still that element of calamity in that game, in a win.
I'm not sure it's that simple, because what you have fundamentally here is, when you look at the 11, not a very good defence and very good attack. In this situation, when you were presented with this, what do you do? Do you go, do I maximise the best qualities I have? Do I attack more? Or do I try and cover them? Do I limit my attacking the good thing that I have? Do I say, we're not going to use them as much because we're worried about how we defend? I would always lean towards attacking, because those are the good qualities you have. Play to your strengths. And when we think about launching it, the reason Spurs were able to score as many goals that they did against Tottenham and then 3 against Liverpool, and generally they score so many goals, is because they do build up. Now, Fraser Forster may not be very, very good. He may not be good at playing out from the back. However, it's an important part of dragging opponents forward. And when they drag opponents forward, what happens? That means there's space in behind for Son, for Kulusevski, for Alyson, for Solanke. If you play long, Son's not going to win it.
No, but we're not saying play long. I think we live in this world. No, not just get rid of it in that moment. In that moment when you've literally got Amad Diallo. I was at the game. I was watching him go in and I'm going, surely kick it. Just kick it. Just kick it. In this instance,
in that
kick
one,
it.
Forster tried to launch it. That's the one he got caught out.
Because he waited too long. I'm not
saying
saying we have to live in a world of 2 extremes where Ange has to sacrifice all his principles. We live in this world of such, extreme opposites, and you're like, just launch it. And listen, I'm the same as you, Hamzah. I go to games, even at League One, and you listen to, just get rid. And you're like, no, there's a point to what they're trying to do. And I absolutely agree with you. But what I'm saying is that the knock-on effect is that it allows that vitriol to build up. It allows that narrative to build up, that you don't know what you're doing, that you won't make any sacrifices. I want Ange Postecoglou to stay at Tottenham for as long as possible. I love watching Tottenham. I'm completely neutral. I love watching every Tottenham game. Gregor, you said it when the match list goes out. If you get sent to a Tottenham game, Alyson, you've just said it. Your kids said you're off to Tottenham. This is going to be great fun. Tottenham have conceded 31 goals in Premier League home games in 2024, their most in a single calendar year since 2007. Tottenham's Premier League matches under Ange Postecoglou have seen an average of 3.6 goals scored per game, both teams combined. Among those to take charge of 50-plus games in the competition, this is the highest goals per game rate for any manager. He's the neutrals legend. I want him to stay for as long as possible. But what I'm slightly bothered by is that he's allowing this narrative to build up that then will mean he might get sacked.
That's another important point.
He would look cleverer. He wouldn't look like he diluted his principles. I think he'd look really astute if he said, okay, Liverpool top of the table, well, they're going to go, top at Christmas. They're the best team in the country at the moment by quite some distance. They're really impressive. I'm missing 10 players. I am gonna adapt to that particular situation, and he'd still have been able to play some nice football.
Just minor adaptations. You
don't have to ditch everything in one go. It's as though he feels like he would be really embarrassed if at any point someone said to him, "You took account of what Liverpool are at the moment. You thought, with my defence, their attack, I'm going to have to beat." Look, also in the Carabao Cup midweek, Southampton, they got rid of Russell Martin, and the interim manager decided, well, he's not going to be there for long. What he can do, he's got Liverpool coming. He can just try and frustrate them, stay in the game for as long as possible. And it didn't work, but it nearly worked, and they weren't embarrassed.
It was a C team.
It was 2-1. But there were still brilliant Liverpool players, and Southampton have rubbish players. You've written today Southampton have rubbish players. And I don't think Spurs' defence is worse than Southampton's defence in terms of age and probably in terms of what they're going to cost in the future. Spurs' defence is better.
It's got 3 goals.
So
that's 3 more than Man City.
but you're saying you can't ask
Gregor
them to do anything at all. Of course you can. You can ask them to frustrate and be organised.
I asked Gregor a question earlier before the podcast. I said, seriously, would you rather be Manchester City, like have their problems, or have Spurs' problems where neither team can defend, but at least one can score? Which would you prefer?
Well, I'd never want to be Man City.
You knew where you were going. I agree, Hamzah. I would rather be Tottenham. And if I was choosing the fans, but I think the point I'm trying to bring in is the wider context and things. So as a Manchester City fan, you won the treble a couple of years ago. You've known unprecedented success. If you have to go through a period of great change, Pep Guardiola's just signed a new contract. The problem with Tottenham and with Ange is that it then becomes a stick to beat him with over and over again. That's what I'm getting at. I just do yourself a favour, Ange. That's what I'm like.
Yeah, from a selfish point of view,
help yourself.
Too.
I want him
Stay
to
in the
help
job.
himself. I want him to. We love him. I love him. He's great in press conferences. Every time any of you ring in from a press conference, I'm always like, I bet he said something either funny, light-hearted, or something quite good analytically. I love watching his teams play. From a neutral point of view, if you're editing on a Sunday and Tottenham are in a big game, you're like, this is great, we'll have a story. I want him to stay for as long as... Help yourself out, Ange. Help yourself, please, mate, please.
It's just English media narrative, honestly.
You're in it, mate. No, you're in it.
If I think there's one failing of Postecoglou, it's that his pressing system is man-to-man. It's actually quite easy to manipulate.
Yes.
Okay, if someone's going to make that argument on TV as a pundit...
You make it now, because you were telling me about this before. You thought that watching this game... that the pressing is a little scattergun.
So over the past 5 years, over the past 10 years, pressing has come on quite a bit. In the past 5 years or so, we've seen man-to-man pressing, more so the last 3, really develop and become more complex. The problem with man-to-man pressing is that when you lock on man-to-man, ideally, if you're technically superior to your opponents or you're physically superior to your opponents, you'll win in a man-to-man system. So that's why, and it's easy to manipulate. If you lock on man-to-man and the opponents pull you out wide, then you leave space in the middle. You don't want to do that because the middle of the goal, easiest for it to goal, all that sort of stuff. So what smart managers like Andoni Iraola, Mikel Arteta have sort of done, they've combined the principles of zonal pressing with man marking to get a bit best of both. Make sure that when you do lock on man-to-man, you still protect the middle. Postecoglou hasn't quite worked out that tweak because pressing has moved on quite a bit in the past 3 or 4 years. So they are still quite easy, Tottenham this is, and his Celtic team to a degree, they were quite easy. You'd see it in the Champions League, less so in the Scottish Premiership, to pull apart and get them to lock on and manipulate them and knock the ball inside. So Liverpool did this a lot. That is a genuine, specific, tactical problem to Spurs. And if someone on TV made that point, congratulations, you've made the best point, criticism.
You've just made it in here.
Yeah, but
I agree that
no one else says
I would
it.
rather now, at this point, see someone analyse what they are trying to do
Absolutely,
as opposed to saying how stupid they are for not doing this.
But what I'm saying is we know the world we live in. We know we live in the world of... we put clips out for this podcast, but those guys are trying to put out clips that are going to bait Tottenham fans into engaging with them.
But it's worse than that. They put it to the manager then.
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying. Help yourself out, and he's a smart bloke. Help yourself out. That's all I want from him. That's all I want. I don't want to lose Ange Postecoglou from the Premier League.
I agree. But I just think that there has to be nuance in this, and the longer I've done this job, I kind of feel that real dogmatists will always fail in the end.
All I want for Christmas is nuance.
Look, there has to be. I'm not talking about the way they even play, the way they play. I understand that, as Hamzah was saying, you have to go back to the goalkeeper to draw the opposition out to create space. But when the risk out far outweighs the reward, when it does with someone can't really deal with the ball at their feet, then it's madness to do
leave
it.
him alone. Salah got 2 goals and 2 assists. Trent was amazing. Soboslai was incredible. McAllister was brilliant. Gravenberch was outstanding.
Hamzah makes a good point, because we should talk about the team that are top of the table and were absolutely exceptional, because that was the other point that we took away from watching it in the office. We were going, crikey, Liverpool are good. And I was like, oh no, I've been saying it on the podcast for bloody ages. Alyson, quite good, Liverpool, I thought.
Yeah, but they had no choice but to be good.
Don't say but, come on.
No. I mean, my interpretation of the match was that Liverpool are going to win probably multiple trophies, actually. They look well primed for that.
She's come round, Gregor, finally.
The only way you can
Just a
do
spirit.
that is by being sensible and pacing yourself. So I was at the Carabao Cup game where Liverpool made a lot of changes for the game against Southampton, and Arne Slot was at pains to say he wasn't making those changes with Tottenham in mind. He was making them with the season in mind. He's thinking long term. He goes into each game with, I think, efficiency is the thing he concentrates on the most. He's not particularly interested in 5-0s or 6-3s. It's 2-0, wham bam, then bit contained. Start thinking, making changes, thinking about what's coming ahead. But Spurs were so silly that Liverpool were able to score 6, and it should have been 9 or 10, given the clear chances they had. Without the key point is they were able to do that and be entertaining without expending too much energy. It wasn't too difficult for them.
Ruthless efficiency.
It was ruthlessly entertaining, which is again another stick to beat Ange with. I think what you score 3 goals at home against the team leading the division, and nobody in the stadium thinks there's going to be a turnaround or they're going to come from behind and win the game.
The scoreline flattered Spurs massively.
Exactly.
I went to the shops at half time to get nappies actually, and I was thinking about the game on the way, and I was like, this could be a real hiding, and
Yes.
it should have been.
Yeah, it could have been.
The scoreline flatters them, so like
Those
that's the
couple
other
of
thing.
goals
That's the other
changed
thing.
it.
Just quick, one other last point of Spurs that, like, you know, there's this narrative that they're great entertainers and stuff, and that I felt that was true earlier in the season, and I said that in here, like, you watch them, the number of sweeping moves and attacks, like fast back to front, direct, dynamic attacks, magnificent stuff. In the last few weeks, they've been calamitous. They've not been the great entertainers. They've been Calamity Jane. Like, they've been quite lucky in some games too. So, but back to Liverpool, they just smothered the centre of the pitch, which is where Spurs often try and break the lines and they try and go through the middle to get out wide. Smothered that, kept winning the ball, turning it over time and time again. And there were some individual performances, like Szoboszlai was an absolute dream.
Absolute dream
All
boat
three.
as well, by the way. I don't think we've ever really acknowledged what an absolute smoke show he
You
is.
just feel like all three of their midfielders could either play 6, 8 or 10.
Which is the
all of
amazing
them.
thing that, you know, Hamzah, you've touched on this as well. Like, so much was made in the summer about not
Exactly,
getting
yeah.
the signings and etc. And that's such an incredible thing to then take what you've got and rotate them around so effectively for each opponent.
The first or second goal, I think, was Szoboszlai. Both Szoboszlai and McAllister Szoboszlai went for the first header, and McAllister scored a second. That's two of them getting into the box. Trent again was just playing some of those passes that you like, not just the cross. Did you see the little clip before that earlier in the first half where he just sort of, it was like a sand wedge where, like, I don't know, you've got like a massive tree on front of you. You've got to get so high to get on
Do
the
you
green.
play golf?
I used to.
Did you? Oh,
And you
that's
know, like, you
disappointing.
think, bugger it, I'll try this. Get the sandwich out, and you
Yeah.
try and, like, you know, really loose wrists, right under it. And he just did that to Salah. Just
Do
like a
you know
little
what?
clip.
We've worked together so long that yesterday I was like, Gregor's back tomorrow. And I was like, the last time he was on, he was talking about the way Trent hits the ball. I bet he'll come back on with some analogy about it again. And you did. That's wonderful.
It was incredible.
Absolutely wonderful. I wanted to finish with a point about Mohamed Salah. Hamzah, I'm going to come to you on an excellent piece that you did with George Willoughby last week, but I'm just going to present you some stats because it'll make your argument even harder. Liverpool's Mo Salah has both scored and assisted 10 plus goals in the Premier League this season, 15 goals, 11 assists. With just 16 games played, this is the joint quickest in terms of appearances by a player to hit double figures for both in a single campaign, which was Harry Kane in 2020-21. This is the 6th Premier League season in which Salah has both scored and assisted 10 plus goals, the most of any player in the competition's history, overtaking Wayne Rooney. Salah has scored and assisted in 7 different Premier League games for Liverpool this season, already the joint most by a player in a single campaign in the competition, alongside Alan Shearer, Thierry Henry, Robin van Persie, Bruno Fernandes and Harry Kane. But Hamzah, your point in your piece with George was that you can maybe see in previous trends with previous players when looking at a broad set of data why Liverpool have yet to rush in with a new contract. Tell us a bit more.
To be clear, I think...
I know, I've set you up for a fall
No,
there, haven't
I think that on Christmas Day, Liverpool will announce like Christmas presents and
I think
contract.
I could see that coming as well. But
no, so essentially, a discussion was started not too long ago. We should, and the idea was you should give Salah whatever he wants, and I think when reading Paul Joyce's pieces, I noticed that he was like he was quite keen to stress. Actually, it's a question of allocation of resources, and you've got to be a bit more thoughtful about this for a number of reasons. So, for example, let's start with if you sign Salah to I've discussed this before. You give him a 3-year contract on $500,000, and we're going to not include bonuses and whatever. That essentially locks up $500,000 a week. That is $78 million over 3 years. And what happens at the end of those 3 years is you've spent $78 million on an asset whose performances are likely to sort of drop off a bit, and then in 3 years' time you've got to replace them. Now imagine doing that and Van Dijk. Let's say you give them both 2-year deals. Van Dijk's on, let's say, 300, Salah 500 for the sake of simple maths. Again, you lock up around 81 million for 2 seasons worth of performances with slightly declining numbers, and I'll come to this in a second. And then you have to replace both again. So the first thing is there's an allocation of resources question. The other thing is that as players get older, they change, and for wingers and forwards in particular, their peak is a lot earlier, and that's why you've got to be careful with these players. So if you look at the rate of dribbles, for example, imagine a simple line chart with a peak right on the y-axis, then very sort of precipitously dropping. So at the age of 18, wingers typically average around sort of 3 dribbles per 90 successful dribbles. By the age of 24, 6 years later, it drops to 1.35. By the age of 30, it's 0.91. So you can see with dribbles in particular, right, the very quick rate of decline, and that's because of physiological change over time and players becoming a bit sort of different as they age. This sort of effect has not eluded Salah. So he also used to dribble at 3.73 dribbles per 90 in 2015. Now, then it dropped to 2.24 in 2019. Now it's 1.61, although I need to update those stats because it was a week ago, right?
Yeah.
They're roughly the same.
It's all right, we'll let you off.
And you've seen this change over Salah's career. So he used to have very, very high XG numbers, and they're still really high. But his XA has increased now, so he's become a slightly more creative player because he's less sort of one-on-ones, playing to the wing. And when you think of this as well, remember as a coach, let's say you've got a dribbler, you've got a winger, and you like to play through the wings and dribble and all that sort of stuff. If the player gets older, they can't do that anymore. So you think, okay, how do I get that quality? How do I attack through the wings? Because this is a tactical thing that I want my team to do. If that player's not doing it, so you've got to make adjustments elsewhere. Maybe you get the fullback to go on. Maybe you get the midfielder to run on. You've got all these things. And when you look at that and then you compare Salah to other... He does, admittedly, take incredible care of his body, but you can look at other forwards. Cristiano Ronaldo is a fantastic example of this. When he returned to Manchester United, he was largely rubbish. He scored goals, but mostly to the detriment of the team. He wasn't able to press because physiologically it's harder to keep up as you get older. He became a box player, and this happens with older players. As they get older...
He'd become all these things before he joined Man United, we should say.
Yeah, exactly. And Ronaldo at his best is better than Salah. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that. I love Mohamed Salah, but Ronaldo is one of the best players ever. And if even he aged poorly, and there are countless other players that have aged poorly, there's a few that have sort of managed to keep it, maybe Ibrahimovic, but...
Would you say that looking at, and it is a fascinating piece, and I would recommend all listeners dig it out, but the charts, did they show, because it was slightly on this kind of 32 age, wasn't it, where you started to see
goal scoring rate drops off
a final kind of burst, and then it could drop, which is why the fascinating dilemma over the contract, right? Do you think it looks like, as a final summary, that Salah is looking like bucking a lot of the trends in your piece, or that actually it's just he's clever adapted his game to mask some of those changes that we don't see?
I think the latter, but it's entirely possible that he just continues being very good and does this. And maybe he's an exception like Ibrahimovic or Thiago Silva, where they're just brilliant throughout their careers. However, from a club perspective, from a sporting director perspective, you have to look at all this data and go, because we analyse, I think, 79,000 players. They all drop off. And people say, well, you're looking at just all the players. When you're looking at an average 33 or 35-year-old, of course their stats are going to be lower. But remember, the average 33 or 35-year-old forward in Europe's top 5 leagues is, by definition, going to be a good player because they've actually managed to resist the effects of it. And they're still playing at that level. So from a sporting director perspective, you look at all this evidence, you go, amazing players have dropped off. A few have managed to stay. And even those that have managed to stay at the top level, they had to adjust their game, and Salah has adjusted his game. Can you still do that? Will he still warrant, for example, £500,000 a week next year, the year after? Does that output stay the same? That, I think, is the question. And I think most people would probably say, we think so, and we're willing to gamble on that.
Yeah.
But I think the
Particularly
gamble
given his form.
is bigger than people realise, and that's why there's a bit of negotiation hesitation. And I wouldn't hand a 3-year deal. No
Another
way.
point is like how well you think a player would be willing to manage that decline when they even start to accept it's happening. Like,
Yeah. Well, like
Ronaldo
Ronaldo
did not.
yeah.
Ronaldo did not. Most players of this level and this like stature do not.
Yeah.
You look at
They will not
Walker,
accept it. So that is another consideration.
Walker, De Bruyne, Gundogan, amazing players. Only a few seasons ago.
Yeah.
And you watch them this season.
1 year ago,
And as I said quite
Go on,
recently,
do the
it
click of
happens
the
like
there's
that.
a click of the fingers. He's back, ladies and gentlemen. He's back with his click of the fingers. It is a fascinating piece. If you look for Hamzah's name and Mo Salah anywhere on the internet, I'm sure you will find this piece. It is really interesting. But as you say, Hamzah, I wouldn't be surprised if we got some kind of nice social media content out of Liverpool over the Christmas period about some of these contracts.